So, hello everybody and welcome. Yes, welcome back here at BSN Network. You get back here, BSN Network. This is the BSN Network podcast here today. It is Monday, February 21st. Hope everybody's having a day so far and a good rest of their day. Yes, their day. It is, in fact, Monday, February 21st here today. Coming off another big weekend in the world of sports. It was the first weekend without football, which was definitely a little bit of an adjustment. Definitely weird not having football on, not watching, all the pregame shows and then getting ready for all of the big games. We've been spoiled with football really ever since September, and yesterday was the first day the first Sunday in a very long time without football. I guess you could say 2 weeks ago when the Pro Bowl happened, there was no football on, but that was still during the season. So it was a little bit of an adjustment. But I got to admit, this year it was, it definitely felt weird not having football. It just as a standpoint, it felt weird, not going on your phone and seeing all the injury updates and, scrolling through the channels on the TV and not seeing, Sunday NFL Countdown or, not seeing, this pregame show and all that. It was definitely weird to see. But kind of as a fan yesterday, I definitely miss it. I've said it. I miss watching. I always say, there's always times where you always you have that feeling. It could be any day where you just miss football. And yesterday, when you missed it, it was definitely weird, like I said. But it wasn't like I felt like there was nothing on. Like there was still a lot to watch. And I felt like last year, due to COVID and all that stuff, I felt like once the Super Bowl was done, it was like, now what happens? I know basketball and hockey was still going on, but with the whole COVID and all the uncertainty around all these teams' season, it was definitely different. So, first Sunday without football, but still a lot that happened over the weekend. As we all know, Kentucky was able to pull out the win on Saturday, so Kentucky moves to 22-5 on the season now, I believe it is. I could check now. Yeah, 22-5 on the season. So they get another big win against Alabama. The game started off really poor for Kentucky, but they were able to bounce back in the second half and to end the first half at a really good end to the first, and were able to bounce back in the second and really play some of their best basketball down the stretch, though. So, really good win for Kentucky. As for the Rangers, they were able to get the win yesterday as well. They defeated the Ottawa Senators, so that was a good win for them. Igor Shesterkin was this close, and I really mean it, this close to getting a goal. If you want to replay that, you can. That close to having our first goalie goal of the season. We also had the Islanders on yesterday as well, which I'm going to get to them in my second topic. A really brutal loss for the Islanders. I feel like this Islanders loss for them today was kind of just the epitome of their season. Kind of just shows us all that their season has been a real disappointment and really just a very up and down and tough year for the Islanders in so many circumstances. So many weird things have gone on this season. They took the loss yesterday to the Canadiens. Nets and Knicks still on the All-Star break. Last night, the All-Star game was phenomenal. I watched it. NBA puts on a good show. Every year they always put on a good show. And the new format that they have actually requires teams to play a little bit of a defense down the stretch. LeBron hit an excellent fadeaway jumper to end the game. It was double team. Levine was in his face. I believe Embiid was coming over. So definitely a great shot by LeBron, and they were able to seal up the victory, and Team LeBron beats Team Durant in the All-Star game. As for tonight, there is no Rangers have a couple days off. They'll be back in action Thursday night against the Capitals. Islanders also have a day off today. Much-needed day off after a brutal loss that they took yesterday against a Canadiens team who has not won back-to-back games at all this season. So Islanders will now head on the road. They play the Seattle Kraken tomorrow night in Seattle. Like I said, Nets, Knicks still on the All-Star break, and the Rangers have a couple days off up until their next game Thursday night back at the Garden against the Capitals. Alrighty, so let's get to the topics for today's podcast. Obviously, a lot to get to come out of the weekend. There was no football, so no recaps, no recaps, no scores or anything like that. With no football, it is definitely a little odd, but we do have a football topic today I want to get to. Two topics today on the podcast. Usually Monday's only one, but today works out. I'll be able to do two topics and then obviously the New York Sports Update. So our first topic today is going to be Robby Anderson and the Jets rumors. Report came out this weekend, specifically really yesterday, to be honest with you. Report came out yesterday and even into Saturday, over the weekend, there was kind of rumblings and reports about Robby Anderson and him possibly eyeing a comeback to come back to the Jets. There's rumors going around that the Panthers might trade him, and supposedly, according to some sources and some insiders within the Jets, it says that they're saying that Robby Anderson wants to come back to the Jets, feels that there's a little bit of a unfinished business with the Jets, which I find very weird for a guy who, when he was leaving the Jets, said he started to lose the love for the game, and now all of a sudden he wants to come back. It's a little weird. So I'm going to get to this. It's definitely an interesting story. Do I think the Panthers trade Robby Anderson? No. Do I think he comes to the Jets? No. But it's still an interesting story. It's still an interesting development to keep an eye out for as the offseason just begins and as free agency continues to get closer and closer. So we'll get to that. This is kind of the time of the year for football where it's a lot of dead time. There's a lot of rumors and a lot of opinions and a lot of predictions and a whole lot of that. And I found this, thought this was an interesting story, so I'll get to it, talk about it. And I'm going to specifically tell you why I really don't have any interest I really have no want to have Robby Anderson back on this team. I really don't. I don't really think we need him. I don't really think he fits the team that we have right now. And to be honest, if we go out and give up pieces for a guy that I think his time here anyway was a little overrated. So I'm going to get to that and get to the Robby Anderson Jets situation. I also want to get to the Islanders. I'm going to talk about their season struggles. I was watching a little bit of the game yesterday against the Canadiens, and just a brutal loss. And you lose to a team like the Canadiens, who first time all season, good for them at least, but first time all season, they've won back-to-back games. The Montreal Canadiens have been a complete embarrassment for a team that got to the Stanley Cup last year. Lightning still won and beat them pretty good, but they still gave them. They were still physical, they were still tough. I mean, they were the underdog, but they still made it a series, made it interesting. I believe the Lightning won I believe it was either 5 games or 6. It was something like that. I know the Canadiens were able to get a win, but for a team that got to the Stanley Cup last season what was that? Yesterday night was like their 9th win. And for the Islanders, for a team to get 1 game away from the Stanley Cup to now not going to probably even make the playoffs, it's definitely concerning. And where do the Islanders go from here in terms of Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz manning the team? And is it time for the Islanders to kind of look for a rebuild and kind of reset things? So we'll get to that. And then we'll also get to the New York Sports Update and finish things off. As I mentioned earlier, we got not a crazy amount on tonight. We got some college basketball, some hockey, but no Rangers, no Isles. Nets, Knicks still on the All-Star break. So Nets are back in action Thursday night at home at Barclays against the Celtics, which most likely will be Ben Simmons' first game. And if it's not Ben Simmons' first game, then his first game will be very soon. KD, his return's expected very soon. Probably not Thursday against the Celtics, but maybe a week or two after that. Definitely sometime early March, I think we all expect Kevin Durant to return. And also this week kicks off a full week of negotiations. And today, 1 Eastern, the MLB will start their negotiations to try and end this lockout. This might be the biggest week for the MLB in terms of if they want to keep this sport alive. You look at the big picture. If you want baseball to still be relevant, if you want baseball to still be something that people talk about, around, the United States and around the globe, and you still want baseball to be a sport that you got fans going to, you got fans paying to go to, you got people watching, you got people buying players' merchandise and team merchandise and jerseys and apparel. If you want that to still happen, this is one of the more pivotal weeks. Because the second the season gets delayed, you're going to lose a ton of viewers. You're going to lose a ton. I mean, I'm sure you've already lost a lot to begin with. And baseball to begin with is already on a downfall in terms of ratings and attendance. But if you have a shortened season and you can't get something hammered out this week, there's true reason to feel that this sport's really going to die. So February 28th is the deadline. They got a week to figure it out. If they don't figure it out in a week, there's going to be problems. All right, so with all that being said, a lot to get to today in the podcast. Gonna, aim for another 40 to 45 minute video. And with all that being said, this is the BSN podcast, and let's get right into it. Alrighty, so interesting story that came out this weekend about Robby Anderson and the New York Jets and the possibility of the Carolina Panthers trading him, and maybe Robby Anderson feels that he wants to come back to the Jets and feels that there's a little bit of unfinished business with the Jets. So this report came out over the weekend. NFL rumors, Robby Anderson prefers Jets if Panthers trade him, and he feels unfinished business is with the Jets. So definitely an interesting story, kind of one that doesn't seem likely, one that I did not see coming at all. I did not see this popping up, in my notifications bar over the weekend, just given the fact of everything that went on while Robby Anderson was leaving New York, and now to all of a sudden kind of turn around and say, hey, I want to come back and let's run this thing back. I like what the Jets are working with in terms of their coaching, and, maybe he sees something in Wilson and wants to play with him. I don't really know, but this is definitely interesting because you talk about a guy who, was with the Jets for the first 4 years of his career, showed some potential, had some moments. My biggest thing with Robby Anderson when he was here is I think a lot of Jet fans overhyped him. I really do believe. I don't think he was anything special. I was never a huge Robby Anderson fan myself, and when we got rid of when he ended up signing with the Panthers in the offseason of in the offseason of 2019 going into 2020, it was kind of like I had the feeling of I wasn't really upset. I know a lot of Jet fans wanted him to get the money and wanted him to be a Jet for a very long time. But Robby Anderson, you look at his career, he's been a very boom-bust type receiver. He's not consistent. He's a guy that pretty much runs deep every play, and a guy who really, for a guy who comes out of college and the Jets draft him and, has some potential, shows some, highlight reel plays when he was at Temple, he's never really done that yet in the NFL. He's kind of been all over the place. It's been, a couple really nice plays here and there, and a couple really bad ones, a couple games where he's non-existent, a couple games where he makes plays. And I felt like last fans, it was kind of a smack in the face of reality for Carolina Panthers fans. Last season it was. Because it was like his first season with the Panthers at 1,096 yards, and it was like, all right, he's in a new system, he's playing well. He had 136 targets, which was the most he ever had in his career. Next closest up to that point was 114, which he had in 2017 with the Jets. And then, he had 95 catches. He played all 16 games. As we all know, this was prior to the season expanding this year. It's one extra game. And it was like last season he was playing well and all that. And then this season kind of dropped off. And it was like a smack in the face, like I said, for Panthers fans, because it was, good season in 2020. Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback, was playing well with him, had some, had some good chemistry with Teddy Bridgewater. And now it's like he's back to where he once was, and that's a guy who's boom bust, not very good, and a guy who runs downfield a lot. When he doesn't get the ball, for a guy, if you're not throwing the ball deep, he's not getting involved. And this season really had it down here, 519 yards, 110 targets, had 110 targets, third most he's ever had in a season in his career. Only 53 catches out of those 110 targets. So he had a lot of drops. He had a lot of a couple bad throws by Darnold, a lot of drops this season, some really bad drops as well. And he only had 519 yards after his first ever 1,000 season. If I'm the Jets, I want to make this clear. You got to avoid Robby Anderson. I'm not going to pay this guy $10, $15 million a year. And this is what I said when his deal was up with the Jets, and it went into the offseason when it was between either, whether he was going to sign with the Panthers, whatever it was. Was he going to re-sign with the Jets or go somewhere else? I've said it for the longest time. Robby Anderson's a very overrated receiver. He's not as good as people make him to be. If the Jets were to go out and trade for him, to pay a guy $10, $15 million to give you average production at best is just completely outrageous and not good. You could get a guy from Michael Gallup who, when he stays healthy, is a real nice piece for way less than $10, $15 million. Then you can a guy, Robby Anderson, who's average at best. In his 6-year career, he's at 1,096 yards. And this season, he had the worst year of his career ever. It was the lowest amount of yards he's ever had in his career. And the third least catches, or fourth actually, in his career in terms of catches. And he had 110 targets and only 53 catches. He caught less than 50% of the passes thrown to him. That's concerning. And if the Jets would go out and trade for him and give up a pick and another piece, I'm not okay with that. And he doesn't really fit in the offense either. We already have Corey Davis. We already have Elijah Moore. Bringing back Braxton Berrios is still a question, but if you bring back Berrios, let's just say, Crowder, I'm going to say Crowder, at this stage of his career, he's a veteran. He's getting kind of on the older part of his career. I could see Crowder signing to a contender and going to win a championship, because right now the Jets are not a championship team. We all know that. They're a rebuild. We hope to see a lot of progress this season, but the Jets are not a win-now type team. They're a team that's building for the future and continuing to try to build the foundation that hopefully leads to many, many wins in the near future. That's at least my hope, and that's, I'm sure, every Jet fan's hope, is that one day a championship will come. But in terms of building this roster and building around Wilson, to give Robbie Anderson all that money doesn't make sense. And you look at it this way too. Like I said, you have Elijah Moore, you already have Corey Davis. Let's just say you bring back Braxton Berrios. All right, good. Those are your guys. You add on, let's just say you sign one other guy. Maybe you go out and sign like an Allen Robinson. Okay, you add on Allen Robinson. Perfect. So you have Berrios, Moore. I'm not saying go out and sign Amari Cooper or trade for Amari Cooper or somebody. I'm just saying sign like Allen Robinson. Like, he's a big name. Not as big of a name as he once was, because he's really struggled the past year and the past couple seasons, but still a really solid asset. Let's say you go out and do that. If you would to go out and sign Robbie Anderson, where is there a fit on the roster for him? You're going to give up pieces for a guy that really doesn't fit on the roster? I mean, Corey Davis had a lot of drops this year. That's bad enough it is, to add a guy who had a ton of drops this past season, and for a guy who caught less than 50% of the passes thrown to him, that's super concerning. The Jets need to put a big X no in going Robbie Anderson. Now, if the Panthers decide to cut him and you want to bring him in as a depth piece, okay, fine. I wouldn't be ecstatic about it. I wouldn't be angry about it. But it would be one of those moves like, look, they cut him, you bring him in, he plays, he doesn't. But you're still going to be paying a lot of money. And if he has another bad year and you have that contract on your hands, it's one of those things where it's like, then you got to find a way to dump off his contract and trade for him, else you're going to be paying all that. So it also puts you in a tough financial cap situation if the Jets go out. There's too many risky things trying to go out and get Robbie Anderson. And another thing too is he completely sold on this organization? Because he said 2 years ago when he left that playing for the Jets made him lose love for football. Which, by the way, maybe that's true, because as a Jet fan watching the team put up garbage every single week, I've at times lost interest. I've watched every game, but I at times lose interest watching those games and wonder why in the world I sit for 3 hours every Sunday and watch it. Believe me, I do. But then all of a sudden, for Robbie Anderson to say that and say, "Oh, I lost love for the game." Okay, fine. If you did, you did. You're 4 years there, you weren't winning. You were a part of 2 years where a quarterback was not living up to expectation. You go to the Panthers, it's not, things aren't going the way that you expected them to go. You have a good first year, then this season, Darnold comes in, you have a terrible year, and now all of a sudden it's like Robbie Anderson just turned around and said, "Oh yeah, Jets, bring me in." But 2 years ago, you lost love for the game, and you weren't buying into what the Jets were preaching, which, by the way, I wouldn't buy into what Adam Gase is preaching either. I would want to get out of there as quick as possible as well. There's just too many questions to this. There's just too many, it's just a complicated puzzle piece to fill in, because there's just too many concerns. Bringing back Robbie Anderson, is he truly sold on what Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas want to build here? Is he truly a piece for the culture? Does he truly believe that coming back to the Jets is going to help him? There's just too many questions and not enough answers. So he's also just an average. You're going to be paying a guy a good amount of money to be an average receiver at best. And coming off the year he just had, not going to give up. Now, do I think if the Jets would to trade for him? Let's say the Jets would to trade for him. Is Mims included in the deal? Maybe. Who knows? Maybe he is. Maybe out of all this, it was Robbie Anderson who was, maybe out of all this, it was Robbie Anderson who was struggling. Or it was Robbie Anderson was losing love for the game because of Sam Darnold. But like I said, as a Jet fan, when I sit there every weekend, believe me, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating as a fan. And there's the times where I'm watching that game and I wonder why I'm still watching if they're down by 30 in the fourth quarter. But I still sit through it. Robbie Anderson to say, "Oh, I lost love for the game," and to now say, oh, I have unfinished business with the Jets. It just doesn't make sense. And maybe, like I said, maybe he sees something in, the regimen with Douglas and Saleh, and maybe he sees something in Wilson, but it's just complicated. And it's not even like he really fits this offense, because this is not an offense that's a high-flying, throw the ball 40 yards downfield every other play type offense. Robbie Anderson's that type of receiver. And it's a lot of short routes. It's a lot of 5-6 yard routes that receivers can make plays and turn them into 10-15 yards. It's a lot of short passes, get a rhythm early, work in the run game. It's a lot of that. It's not so much of, Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball deep to Tyreek Hill every play for 40-plus yards downfield. That's not what the Jets' offense is. And Robbie Anderson's that player that can run downfield and catch the ball every play, but the Jets aren't going to throw the ball downfield a lot. They don't. We saw that this year. And that's why Wilson played so well late in the season, because he played within the offense. Early in the year, he was struggling because he was trying to throw the ball deep too much. He was trying to make the big play. He was playing hero ball. The Jets' offense is not hero ball. The Jets' offense is short passes, get some first downs, some dink and dunks, some screen passes, get some, get some running backs coming out of the backfield, set up the run game, long drives, wear down the defense. It's the West Coast offense. We see the Niners use it. The Niners use that offense. It's short passes. It's nothing flashy. It's a lot of running. It's a lot of screens. It's a lot of just short passes, wear down the defense, get some points, and boom, rely on your defense to make some stops. Robbie Anderson would not fit in that at all. And we saw it with the Jets. A guy who runs deep every play, does nothing. Runs deep, ball's not thrown to him. Like, go through it. Let me read you his game log last year. His game log last season. Let me just read you them. Let's just say, okay, fine. To start off the season, first game, 1 catch for 57 yards, was the touchdown against the Jets. Second game, 3 catches for 38 yards. Third game, 1 catch, not 8 yards. His most yards he had in a game, there was a couple games. 3 catches for 11 yards. That was a game against the Vikings where they lost. A lot of really bad games. His most yards he had in a game this season was 7 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. That was by far his best game. That was a loss to the Falcons. So those are just some of the games. And look, they only won 5 games this year. So it was ugly. And there was so much anticipation to this season for a guy like Sam Darnold and Anderson to underwhelm too much. I just wouldn't do it. If I'm the Jets and I'm Joe Douglas, there's so many better options out there than the trade for Robbie Anderson. And even if he's cut, there's so many better free agent options out there. Christian Kirk, Michael Gallup, you can get those guys for less than what you're getting Robbie Anderson, and those guys probably will put up more production than Robbie Anderson is. Robbie Anderson went from being an under-radar player to being one of the more overrated receivers in the league, just because of that one good season he had last year. And now everyone's like, oh, he's got some money. He looks, he's doing pretty good. He's electric. What's so electric about Robbie Anderson? He's had one 1,000-yard season in his 6-year career. He had 4 years with the Jets where it was so inconsistent, and he's coming off the worst year of his career. There's not much to like about Robbie Anderson, if you ask me. Douglas and Saleh and the front office need to avoid this move. So many better options out there for lower costs, and there's a lot of options out there that you can make via trade that you might be giving up more pieces, but you're going to get a whole lot better in return. I take Christian Kirk. I take Michael Gallup all over Robbie Anderson. A lot of Jets fans, when he left, that everyone's like, oh, how dare you leave Robbie Anderson? Look at the number. He's not that good of a receiver. He's really not. And he had a good season with the Panthers in 2020, don't get me wrong. But this year, to come back and give up pieces for him, I would not do it. And you wonder, in the Panthers quarterback situation, so confusing too, because who even knows what's the future with Darnold is there? To just talk about the Panther side of things, Darnold's future is there uncertain. You wonder if Darnold's ever going to get another starting job in the NFL. Alrighty, so let's get to this article here. So, veteran wide receiver Robbie Anderson would savor a New York Jets reunion in the event the Carolina Panthers trade him this offseason, according to DJ Bien-Aimé, the second of the New York Daily News. If Anderson is moved, the Jets are his preferred destination, a source said. DJ reported. He feels like he has unfinished business in New York and likes Zach Wilson's talent. Anderson spent his first 4 years in the NFL with the Jets before signing with the Panthers in 2020. New York replaced him with Brashad Perryman and then signed Corey Davis and Keelan Cole to address the passing game in 2021. However, the Jets once again head into the spring with a pressing need at receiver. Davis, Cole, and Elijah Moore combined to finish with fewer receiving yards, 1,479, than Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams this past year. See, that's not really fair comparisons because, I know one player had more than you, but you're talking about Cooper Kupp, who had the best season for any receiver in the history of the NFL. So it's not really a fair comparison. Part of that was the attribute of having a rookie quarterback, Zach Wilson, who struggled mightily under center and probably wasn't ready to assume the starting role so early. But the lack of a true number one wideout is glaring. Anderson is coming off a somewhat disappointing season himself. Not somewhat, it was awful. Finishing with 53 catches, 519 yards, and 5 touchdowns. His 9.8 yards per catch were below his career average of 13.2. In the 28-year-old defense, the Panthers' offense was one of the worst in the NFL. I think they meant offense there. Christian McCaffrey was limited to just 7 games, and a change of scenery did little to help Sam Darnold. When Anderson had Teddy Bridgewater throwing him passes in 2020, he cracked 1,000 receiving yards for the first time in his career. While the 6'3 pass catcher wouldn't solve all the Jets' problems, he'd bring something different to New York through his ability to torch opposing secondaries down the field. I disagree with that. We saw what he could do 4 years in New York. He runs deep every play, and he doesn't get the ball much. And when you throw the ball deep, what's the really chance of that happening? Especially against some of the elite corners. Or just look at the ones in the AFC East. J.C. Jackson, not Stephon Gilmore, he's no longer, he's actually with the Panthers now, but J.C. Jackson, Tre'Davious White, Miami's, I think, Xavier Howard, I think, still there. You go to, Tre'Davious White, so many good corners in the AFC East. Like, it just wouldn't work. Carolina might be enabled to deal, to considering the financial implications. So this is some of the numbers. Trading Anderson before June 1st would add $7.7 million in dead money, but save $9.2 million per spot track. Waiting until after June 1st would spread the dead money hit across 2022 and 2023 and bring $13 million in savings. So it's a high cost price for a guy who's very, very average, and really, he's average at best. And it's not like I don't like Robby Anderson. Like, the guy, it's not like he's a jet killer or I just think he's overrated. And I think that he just would not fit the team. And I also think that if you really want to build around Wilson with true, legit talent, Robby Anderson, to give up pieces for him is not the way to go. To pay a guy anywhere from $7 to $15 million a year to give the production that Robby Anderson's going to give is just not worth it. When there's so many other possibilities out there for lower costs that are going to be more production, and maybe some guys that are high cost are going to give you a lot more production. So I would not make this move if I was the Jets. And for the Panthers, you got an interesting thing on your hands, because do you keep Robby Anderson? Panthers, Matt Rule's got a bad situation in Carolina. Because he's going into a season where if he has another 5-win season, he's gone. He's not going to be the head coach. So he goes into a season where you have Sam Darnold at your quarterback. What do you do there? This is not a quarterback with a great. This is not a draft with any great quarterbacks by any means. So do you take the risk here? Do you go out and maybe try to sign or strike a trade for somebody? There's so many questions. There's so many glaring needs and so many glaring questions. Like, what do you do with McCaffrey? Like, a guy he hasn't been able to stay healthy. If you rely on him to carry your offense for a guy that might only play 5-7 games in this year again because he hasn't been able to stay healthy, there's so many issues in Carolina and so many questions, and this is definitely one of them. But if I was the Jets and I was Joe Douglas, I would not make this move. Alrighty, so that's what I got for the New York Jets and the Robby Anderson trade rumors. Comment down below what your thoughts are. If you're a Jet fan and you want to comment, would you like to see Robby Anderson back in the Jets, and would you rather trade for him or maybe wait for the Panthers to cut him? And are you okay with bringing a guy with that's going to get paid a decent amount to give you average production? Let's see. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Coming up next, I'm going to get to some hockey. I'm going to get to the Islanders. The Islanders' season struggles. After yesterday's loss, I felt the need to talk about them. A brutal shootout loss to the league worst Montreal Canadiens, who, by the way, that was only their 10th win of the season. The Canadiens are 10-33-7. It's the first time this year that they have won back-to-back games. Why the Islanders might be looking to maybe tear this thing up and restart once the season's over. We'll get to that and much more coming up next on the BSN Network Podcast. All right, so we welcome you back here up at the BSN Network Podcast here today. It is, in fact, President's Day. So it is Monday. I'm sure many of you might have a day off today. It is, in fact, Monday, February 21st, coming off another weekend in the world of sports where a lot was on. Like I said, first weekend without football. So yesterday I was watching a ton of hockey. I don't know. Let's go through all the games I got. So I got ESPN Plus, so I'm able to watch pretty much any game from all around the league. And I was watching tons of games. Let me think. I was watching the Coyotes Stars game a little bit while I had the All-Star game on. I was watching a little bit of the Sabres Blue Jackets. I was watching a little bit of the Islanders. I watched a lot of the Islanders Canadiens game. Was watching a little bit of watched the whole Penguins Hurricanes game. What else was I watching? There was another game too. Blackhawks game I was watching. Was that the Blackhawks? And I forget who they were playing. Obviously watched the Rangers Senators game. Was watching some of that. Was watching some of the Blackhawks game. I saw the Rangers game, but the Blackhawks game. I forget who the Blackhawks were playing. Was it the Capitals? I don't know. I don't know. I was watching some of the game, and I forget who they were playing now. I want to say it was the Capitals. Let me see. Blackhawks were playing the Panthers. Never mind. It was the Panthers. Stupid me. I knew it was two. See now. Yeah, because they were wearing their white uniform. I knew it was two red teams. I just forget which exactly. So it was the Blackhawks, Panthers. Panthers ended up winning that game, I believe, 5-2. They got two late, 5-2. Yeah, they got two late empty netters. It was actually a good game, and the Blackhawks played pretty well. I mean, for a team that has been struggling this season, I know Marc-Andre Fleury has kind of been disappointment, and maybe there's possibilities him returning in Vegas. If with Vegas and Robin Leonard, and he's been all right, but nothing great, and bring back Marc-Andre Fleury to see if they can go on for a cup, and for a Blackhawks team that more than likely ain't going to make the postseason. Got some good guys on that team like Patrick Kane and stuff, but a team that's just they're in one of these stages where they got to make a decision. They got to make a decision to either blow it all up or kind of work with what they got, and I think they need to blow it all up. So I also was watching the Islanders game yesterday, and I got to be honest with you, I have not seen a ton of Islanders games this year. I've only seen a few. Only a couple, and not many. I mean, I've watched the highlights just so that I know what I'm talking about when I come on here. But I haven't seen a ton in terms of actually sitting there and watching the game and, watching it with a close eye. So yesterday I was watching NHL Network, and they have all the stuff on. So I was watching, the Islanders Canadiens game, and I was, not watching it with an eye of, dissecting the team, but I was watching it with kind of an eye of like what's going on with them and what's happening with them, because I know they've struggled this season. They lose last night. There's 18-20-7 on the season. That's a total of 43 points. And I understand they've only played 45 games this season, and they put that equivalent to like the Rangers. The Rangers have played 50. So they have 5 less games than the Rangers. They have 7 less games than the Capitals, who right now own the last playoff spot in the Metropolitan Division. So if there is a team to come out of the Metropolitan last, it would be the Capitals. So right now, the Metropolitan playoff standings stand like this. Panthers are in first, 34-11-4. They have 72 points. Penguins are second, 52 games in. They're 31-13-8. They have 70 points. They lose yesterday to Carolina. And the Rangers are in third, 50 games played, 32-13-5, fresh off the win yesterday against Ottawa. They have 69 points. And the Capitals are in fourth. They hold the last playoff spot in Metropolitan. 52 games in, 28 wins, 15 losses, 28, 15, and 9. And they have 65 points. Now, the rest of the standings, the next 4 teams, the closest is the Blue Jackets at 51. The Islanders, which I'm going to get to in a second here, is at 43. Flyers are at 39, and the Devils are also at 39. So Flyers and Devils at the bottom of it, no chance. Now, the Islanders have played 45 games this season. every team in the Metropolitan has played more than 45 games. So the Islanders have played the least amount of games in the Metropolitan, which is a positive for them because it does mean that they still have a lot of ground to make up, and there's still a lot of extra games they have in hand. They, 5 games left. If they go on a streak where they win 8 of their next 10, they get to about 52 points, and maybe they're not gonna make the playoffs, but they still do have 5 games in hand, and they still have 37 games to go on the season. So they still got a lot more games left. They still got a lot more time to make up some ground. While the majority, all these other teams have 30 games and 32 games and 31 games left, the Islanders have 37 left. And that could be a good thing and a bad thing, because that could mean a whole lot more losing for the next 37 games, or that could maybe mean, hey, the final 37 games, they play pretty well. But I was watching the game yesterday, like I said. And you kind of look at the Islanders' season. And like I said, I haven't watched every single game, so forgive me if maybe I'm a little off on some of the stuff I say. If you're an Islander fan and you've seen every game and you've watched it and you've kind of been in that circle of pain this year, where it's really been an underwhelming year for a team that got so far last season to fall to the Lightning and into not be able to make the Stanley Cup. They got so far though, and it was like kind of the whole city, it was kind of like the entire New York gathered around them, and then for them to lose, it was tough. And, I was even kind of following them, and I got into it. I was like, all right, I'm kind of on the Islanders bandwagon here. Like, let's see. I know I'm a Ranger fan, but I was kind of like, hey, let's see maybe a New York team win for once. Something that we don't see often, right? New York sports have been terrible for the past decade, and for the past decade now, and we haven't had a championship. We haven't had I know New York City FC, the soccer team, won. We haven't had a championship really since the Giants. And that was back, when they beat New England and stuff. So it's been a long past decade for New York. So we kind of all were on the bandwagon train, and it was all the Nassau Coliseum stuff, and it was like a feel-good vibe last season around the Islanders. And it was like, it was kind of a team where, last year's Islanders team, and the same could be said for this year's team, like, there was no big-time star. There was no Connor McDavid. The Rangers obviously have Artemi Panarin. You go to teams like, the Avalanche have Nathan McKinnon. Maple Leafs have, the Maple Leafs have Austin Matthews. I'm trying to think. The Blackhawks, which I was just talking about, they have, Patrick Kane. And you go around the league. All these teams have these big-time players, and that's fine and all. I have no issue with that. You even go out, the Bruins have, kind of that little bit of that big three with Marchand, Pastrnak, and Bergeron. You even go to trying to think who else. There's so many teams. There's so many teams out there that have like that one big star player, right? And then have that one guy that really, even go to the Flames. They got Johnny Gaudreau and, a really solid player there. You go around the league, there's a lot of them. I mean, obviously the Capitals, it's Ovechkin. The Devils, he's not a superstar, but definitely a rising star like Jack Hughes. The Islanders don't really have that. And last season, that was what was so special about them. Is like they weren't that flashy team. It's like they weren't like the Lightning who had Steven Stamkos and were that flashy team that won and it was always pretty. They were kind of that tough, gritty team that was always, fighting. They were always battling. They were tough. They were gritty. They were always, they were finding ways to win. Was it the prettiest wins ever? No. But it was gritty, it was tough, it was physical, and they were winning. And they got guys like Matt Barzal and, Dobson and, Brock Nelson and, Bailey. And you even go to like Anders Lee, who obviously tore his ACL, but he's been back this season. You go to all those guys, and it was like a tough, gritty team. It was a team that was fun to watch. They were physical, they were gritty, they were winning. It was a lot. The games were won because of physicality, and they were able to protect their net, and they were able to score just enough. And that was able to get them deep in the playoffs and very, very close. I believe one game away to the Stanley Cup Finals, which they did not get there. As we all know, the Lightning ended up defeating the Canadiens. But watching that game yesterday, and I know this season the Islanders have been the Islanders this season have had so many ups and downs. As we all know, they started off the season with 13 straight road games because UBS Arena was still being built. And then you go into a new arena. With that in itself is a little bit of an adjustment. I don't care how excited or happy you are. It's a little bit of an adjustment for anybody. New arena, and go into a new arena. You have 13 games to start the season. We're on the road. 13. We all think that these 5-6 game road trips are long. To start the season, 13 games on the road. They always talk about in sports starting on the right foot, right? Starting the season on the right foot, on a high note, beginning the season on the right foot, right? Starting it off good. They always talk about it. To start the season with 13 games on the road, that's hard to do. And right off the bat, we saw this Islanders team struggling. And then, you saw, right off the bat, as we all know, this Islanders team, like I said, began to struggle a little bit. And then you go into, all these, started to struggle a little bit, right? Hurricanes beat them. The first couple games they started to lose. They started to, struggle a little bit, and teams started to really beat them. And it was like, you could really tell that it was tough for them playing on the road for all this. Even their first home game against the Flames, they took a 5-2 loss. Then they lost to the Maple Leafs 3-1. They didn't get their first home game. They did not get their first home win up until, when was it? Like March, what was it? Like December 11th? Was it that their first win at home? I'm looking here. Something like that. It was such a rocky start. And then you had the middle of the year where you had them postponing all the Canada games, which that knocked out the Islanders for like a good week due to COVID. And plus all the injuries that this team has, I believe it's really like the first time that this team's finally playing with their whole rotation and everybody healthy. It's been such a tough year for them, and you do have to put that into account. Don't get me wrong. You always got to put that into consideration. That it's been such an up and down year. You start off the season with 13 straight games and all that stuff, right? We understand all that. But what we saw last season was a tough, gritty team. And this year, watching yesterday's game specifically, I can't say that. Like, I feel like the lack of having that true, pure scorer, true talent on this team is finally coming to bite them. Because losing to Canadians is unacceptable. Canadians, by the way, this year are 10-33-7. Islanders now fall to 18-20-7. And just watching that game yesterday, there's just not the same energy in the building around the team as there was last year, and specifically throughout the postseason last season. Because it just seems what I'm watching is an old team that is like, it's almost like an old, it's like an old arena that just needs to go. That's what it seems like. And UBS Arena is new, and I'm hearing very, very good things about it. But it's like what I'm watching is like an old team that just needs like a shakeup. It's an organization that just needs a restart. I'm watching a veteran team. I'm watching a team that's got a lot of physicality, not much big time scoring talent. Just get beat by some of these bad teams. Lose to the Canadians. They lose to the Sabres 6-3. They allow up 6 goals to the Sabres. You get crushed by the Flames. You lose to the Oilers. Like, you're losing to a lot of these other young and up-and-coming teams. And I think this is a signal to the Islanders, despite everything they've went through this season. Starting off the season with 13 games on the road because UBS Arena is still being built. You talk about, starting that season off like that. You had the COVID pause in the middle of the year that was completely out of their controls due to Canada and their situation and Gary Bettman postponing games, right? That was completely out of their control, but that's what happened. Then you have, all these injuries and all these guys out and not fully in and all these guys, this guy's in, but, it was the first, a couple days ago, it was the first time their entire team, key players were all playing together. And then pour that all onto the fact that, your goalie situation has not been as great as it was last season. Varlamov and Sorokin have not been as consistent as they were last year. And specifically, Varlamov has been a real disappointment. In the games that he's played, they've lost 10 times. He's had 14 games. They've had 3 wins, and he's lost 10 times. So really, really, really bad for him. He's 3-9-1. And right now, what we're seeing out of this Islanders team, it's like they're just running out of gas. It's like what was so good with them last year, the physicality and all that, they're running out of gas. They just aren't the same team. They're not playing with that same level of energy. And we see that yet again on display yesterday with an unexpected loss. You look at the roster too. There's a lot of veteran guys. I mean, even go to like Zdeno Chara. Like, it's just time to move on. Like, it's time to restart. It's time to retool. And I'm not saying for Lou Lamoriello and, Barry Trotz to be, blow this thing up and Barry Trotz shouldn't be the coach anymore. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is you need to start moving on from so many veteran guys. I think the Islanders need to be sellers at the deadline. They're not making the playoffs. I can tell you right now, they have 43 points. They are 22 points behind the Capitals. And I know they've played 8 or 7 less games than the Capitals, but you cannot make up 22 points in 7 games. You just can't do it. If you win the next 7 games, all of them, 14 points is the max you can do. So if you win 7 games in a row and the Capitals lose their next 7, 14 points, which should then make it where you're 8 points behind them, which still isn't great. So they do have some games in hand. And maybe they start to win a little bit, and maybe at the end of the season, I don't know, final 2 weeks, they make things, or the final month of the season, they make things interesting. Maybe we go into April, and maybe they're 10 or 12 points out, but or not even 12 points out, like something like that. Maybe they're 12 points out in April. You go into April, they're like 12 points out, and maybe there's some hope. Maybe there's some hope of a magical turnaround. But what I'm seeing is a team that is in deep, deep need of just a reboot and a restart. And that means retooling with young players. Maybe you bring in a new coach. I think Barry Trotz is great and all, but maybe you do. I think Barry Trotz, I think he's great. And I think Barry Trotz hanging on to him would be fine. But you bring in some young guys, get rid of some of these veterans, and it should start at the trade deadline. Because this team's just not playing with that same energy and that same fire and that same passion as we saw last season and years before that. Islanders need a reset. They need a restart. They need a little bit of a reboot, a retool for a roster right now that's just not what it once was. By the way, going to get to the New York Sports Update here. By the way, Nets signed Goran Dragic. So, some news there. About Goran Dragic. He's now going to sign with the Brooklyn Nets. Goran Dragic just signed with the Nets after contract buyout from the Spurs. So a depth piece for the Nets. He's a ball handler. He can, pass, can dish out some assists. Didn't play much this year at all. Not a star by any means, but he's a shooter. He can make some shots. He can ball handler. He can ball handle. Dish out some assists, depth, play some minutes. Kind of one of those moves. Nothing where it's not a move where it's gonna be here and then make this team up here. This team should already be up here now. But add that on top of guys like, Curry and stuff who can shoot. You add him into the rotation, the uncertainty around Joe Harris. So you bring in a guy who can shoot, bring in a guy who can ball handle, dish out some assists, give you some minutes off the bench. Not a bad move for the Nets. I'll probably get more into that tomorrow. Anyway, let's get to the New York Sports Update and finish off this podcast here today. By the way, the new college basketball AP poll came out. Kentucky's now 6th in the poll. So, definitely interesting. Auburn lost to Florida on the road. Got upset. They only lose by 10. Or they lost. They lost on the road to. They only dropped 1 spot. So the top 10 is Gonzaga, Arizona, Auburn, Purdue, Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, Villanova, Texas Tech, and Baylor rounds out the top 10. St. Mary's is in there. Alabama, interesting. After the loss to Kentucky, they are number 24, so they actually moved up a spot. Very perplexing. Murray State's 19. Let's see, what else? Houston's 14. UCLA's to 12. Arkansas's 18. Tennessee, after they're 17. Villanova's making their way up again to number 8 after they had a beat down against Georgetown. So, those are team. Texas Tech also back, continuing the top 10. Alright, so let's get to the New York Sports Update here and finish off this podcast. Let's see. Alrighty, so as for the NHL, tonight we got a good amount of games on. We got 5 games on tonight. You got the Avalanche, Bruins. I'll give Avalanche to win. Hurricanes, Flyers, give me the Hurricanes. Flames, Jets, I'll take the Flames. Maple Leafs, Canadiens, give me the Maple Leafs. And Kraken, Canucks, I'll take the Canucks. Got 3 top 25 college basketball games on today. Ohio State, Indiana, I'll give Ohio State the win. UCLA, Arizona State, give me UCLA. And Baylor, Oklahoma State, I'll take Baylor. And NBA is still on the All-Star break. That will return Thursday. And nothing going on in the world of fantasy basketball, as we all know, due to the All-Star break. So, that will do it for the podcast here today. Another good podcast in the books. Tomorrow, I want to get to some Igor Shesterkin. I'll talk about Goran Dragic and him signing with the Nets. Nice little depth piece. Nothing crazy, nothing wild. Not something to throw a party about. But it's a depth piece. It's a guy who could shoot, guy who can ball handle, pass the ball a little bit. The uncertainty around Joe Harris to give you some more bench depth behind already what we got, some good ball handlers and shooters. So, just building depth and building the best possible team as we get closer and closer come playoffs, and hopefully at the end of all this, the Nets are the champions. So that will do it. Another good podcast in the books, starting off another week. And as always, I will see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.